Assalamu alaikum. We're back with another episode. We have an amazing guest, Hamza, college counselor and coach. He helps Muslim teens get into their dream colleges. What really inspired me about messaging Hamza was one of his videos came across and how he was talking about how he believes everyone should get an education and how it's important. For me, it drew me, and I believe that everybody should be having the access to education. And today I want to give the biggest welcome to Hamza. Hamza, welcome to the Ways podcast.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much, Osama.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Well, likewise, we're happy to have you. Your story is so interesting. So I was watching a video on TikTok, which I told you before we last spoke, and I'd love for you to talk about your story and tell us more about your journey and what led to finding you being the founder of Five before college.
Yeah, so I don't know. That's a big question. Can maybe give a little bit more of my story. So, Hamza, my name is Hamza Henshaw. I was born and raised in Boston. And so I grew up. My dad was a lawyer. My mom was an English teacher. Not non-Muslim family. I ended up going to a boarding school when I was in ninth grade. So when I was about 14 years old, and that's really where my life changed. I went to a boarding school where my father had gone, my grandfather had gone, sort of family tradition, and so most of the people looked a lot more like me, like American-born, students. Sort of, it's one of these feeder schools for top colleges and things like that. But one of my classmates, his name was Nabil, was very different than that. He was of Indian origin, so ethnically Indian, but he grew up in Kenya in East Africa. Now his family had moved to Vancouver, and now he's studying in Boston. So really exotic background. And Nabil, mashallah, he was very much a practicing Muslim. So, from almost the first day that I met him, I realized he was quite different than the rest of us. So, for example, in the evenings when it would be time to go to bed, we'd all be in the bathroom brushing our teeth, etc. And so Nabil had like a miswak, obviously used toothbrush and toothpaste as well, but he also had this miswak. So we see him brushing his teeth with a stick, and we're a little confused by that. Asked him questions, but then he also would go through this whole ritual where he would put the water up and down his hands. He'd like do these aggressive like farmer's blows into the sink, and then eventually put his feet in the sink. And that was the part which it really stuck out to me. Like, and it's also one of those things, like in retrospect, now that I've been Muslim for a long time and I made wudu in a lot of public places, most Muslims are reluctant, to put their feet in the sink in a public place like that. It takes a certain level of sort of self-belief and so on to do that. But anyway, then after that, after he made wudu, he would go back to his dorm room, and he was the only Muslim in the school, but he would still call the adhan out loud. So I'd just be sort of walking in the dorm, and we'd hear this Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. So again, later I asked Nabi, I was like, when I pray alone, I don't call the adhan out loud. What were you thinking there? Like, why'd you do that? And so he said that there was a hadith that he'd heard the summer before he came to St. Mark's, that if you're a shepherd in the sort of wilderness and you're just alone with your sheep, you should still call the adhan out loud, because all of the mountains and the grass and so on will bear witness for you, and so on. And so he said, that's how he felt. He was a shepherd alone in the wilderness, and so he would call that adhan. So, I mean, long story short, obviously we can go into more details if you want. Started getting more and more close with Nabil, and ultimately, we ended up taking Shahada. Obviously, there's a lot more to the story than that, but there were three of us who all became Muslim there. So we went from one Muslim in the school, and then three people converted over the course of sort of ninth and 10th grade, and alhamdulillah, that was the entry point. So maybe I'll stop there. Obviously, I haven't talked about Five before college or any of that work, but you might have other questions around this. Allah.
Absolutely. Actually, what you said is about like when people are doing wudu and they're putting their feet in the sink. Yeah, sometimes you realize people might be standing and they might be cleaning their feet like this way. Like not everyone's maybe as comfortable, or maybe may not have the confidence because you might be looked at weird. So I guess from you like staring at that, like did you have any initial thoughts of like what he's doing? This is weird to me. Why is he cleaning his feet?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, when you're a teenager, when you see someone who's different, the first inclination is to make fun of them, right? The first inclination is to, And I don't know whether I did it as much, but certainly people in the dorm did. And I mean, it's a boarding school, you get to know each other pretty well, and so people would do that. But it was amazing with Nabil, like any sort of insult or joke about him would sort of bounce off him like Teflon. Like it didn't stick because he was just such a sort of general jovial person, and he had good akhlaq, and so on. So but it definitely struck you. I mean, there are other things. He used to eat with his hands, like, so he's really very much into the sunnah, essentially. Like, we'd see him eating his rice and stuff like that with his hands, and so on. And so all these things are pretty foreign in the Western context, to see someone doing stuff like that. But there's a nur to the sunnah, and it has a magnetic effect that draws people in. I remember when we were at football practice, we were on the football team together, and that especially in the winter, the time for Asr comes, and you're gonna miss it, and so on. So he used to go and take the team water bottles and make wudu on the sidelines and just sort of pray right there on the sidelines. So essentially, it was his like open, unapologetic, joyful practice of Islam that was just like, wow, there's something special about this guy, and I want to learn more.
So beautiful. And I guess my next question, because I think you said you converted at the age of 15, and in terms of like, when was that moment when you realized I want to convert to Islam? Like, when did you feel like when you were learning, maybe like like your friend Nabil was telling you certain stuff, but was that moment like within a month or 2 months? Was it instantly, or was it a couple months before you were really affirmed like I want to become Muslim now?
Yeah. So we started to get more and more sort of interested in Islam. We used, on Saturday nights, we'd wait for the dorm parent to go to sleep, and then we'd sneak out of our rooms and go to Nabil's room. And he had some cool books. He had this cool called The Spectacle of Death, which was sort of all about what happens in the grave and Yom Al-Qiyamah and so on. And it was like, wow, this is like hardcore. It's fascinating stuff. And then Nabil's family was actually very close with Hakeem Olajuwon, the basketball star from the Houston Rockets. So the Rockets were playing the Celtics, and Hakeem Olajuwon came to our school, and he spoke to the whole school about his experience with Islam. He wasn't really talking about all the basketball stuff. He was very humble, sitting on the ground, and so on. And then and like at the time, Islam wasn't really part of the school curriculum, and so Nabil really sort of pushed back against the school, and they added it to the curriculum. So we started learning, and then they brought in some guest speakers, and there was another amazing guest speaker who came and spoke very movingly about Islam. So all these things were sort of happening. And then I remember one time I was with Nabil in someone else's room, actually, and he said, "Do you want me to tell you a sentence that is more valuable than the seven heavens and the seven earths? That's weightier than everything that you see." And so obviously, who asks a question like that? Like, you want to tell me one sentence that's more valuable than the world and everything that's in it? And so I said, sure, of course. And so then he said, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. And I remember even saying it now, I sort of feel the same. Like this, like electricity, like goes through my body. Like I felt like the goosebumps come and things like that. And there was something like, I was like, whoa, what is going on here? This is ajib. And so then, the moment I really think I became Muslim was Nabil had invited us. He was part of like the effort of dawah, like Jamaat al-Tabligh and so on. And so there was an ijtima in New York City. So the two others and myself, the two others had sort of already become Muslim earlier, and I was sort of, I don't know, I was in this like nether region. I was sort of like hanging out with the Muslims and so on, but I hadn't really like officially taken shahada or anything. So we went there and we arrived in the middle of the night, and it's Tablighi style, so everyone's sleeping on the ground, all these big bearded dudes in their sleeping bags and so on, and it's like very foreign atmosphere, and so I was trying to sleep, all these snoring dudes all around me. And then it's like 3 in the morning, and I see people start to wake up. They go, they make wudu, and they're making these long rak'ats, right? Like now we're in Ramadan, and we do this qiyam, but this was just any random time, and then they're like crying and making du'a, and I'm like, what is going on? Like I'd never seen that level of spiritual connection before. And so then, the next morning, like, it's after Fajr and so on, there's like breakfast, and they have like the dastakhan, they like roll the thing out, you're sitting on the floor and everything, eating your like cream cheese and honey. And I look, and like we're right near the Model UN. I mean, right near the United Nations. And, here's like an African guy, a Desi guy, an Arab guy, a white Muslim, black Muslim, like it was amazing, like to see the diversity of the ummah, sort of like Malcolm X experienced when he went for Hajj and so on. And I was just like, by the time I saw all that, like I always point to that as like the moment that my heart really changed. I was like, khalas, this is my path, this is what I want. And so alhamdulillah.
That's such a beautiful story. Even to your point, like how you're saying you're watching people like cry and like prayer, like making dua, and like you felt as if it changed your life. Because even like like as Muslims, as we know, like when you're like one of I guess a sign that your dua is accepted is when you're crying. Like you're actually
Mm.
so in depth because you can make a half-hearted dua like Ya Allah, like give me this, but you're not fully in tune. Like do you know exactly what you're saying, which is so beautiful to see your story, especially at 15 years old too, because to your point earlier about in high school, everyone's making fun of everybody, like anything that's weird or absurd, like you're gonna joke around about it. But to see how like to me, it seems like how observed you were, and like you wanted to
Mhm.
learn from certain people, and you want to learn. And having a friend like that, may Allah bless his heart, and like with everything he does, that's amazing. And now my question is to like my next question is to you. Like, so to me, when I was talking to you off camera, like we spoke a lot about education and like your passion. What led to you starting to help people to get into their dream colleges? Like, what was that initial thought? Like, do you believe is it because you felt certain people were deprived from going to college or a university, whatever it might be, that you felt that everybody should have the right to an education? What led you to start this journey? And yeah, we would love to hear
Yeah,
your thoughts.
yeah. I mean, I think to explain that, I should probably like keep going with this story. So I became Muslim that I was in like 10th grade, like 15 years old, and then when I went through the college application process myself, like I said, this was sort of a feeder school, top private school, and so on. So both Nabil and I ended up getting into Harvard. We went there together. And studied. I studied Near Eastern languages and civilizations, so Arabic and Middle Eastern history, and some economics and so on. I started my career in Islamic finance, like when I first finished. Worked in New York, then I worked in South Africa. But pretty quickly on, I discovered that that was not the term I use is that was not my qibla. That was not my sort of calling to do this finance and stuff. It made a lot of sense on paper. It was a way to do something that felt religiously safe and good, but also make decent money. But in practice, when I was doing the work, it wasn't really energizing for me. And so then I switched into education, and I started working overseas. I worked in the Emirates for some time. I eventually got my master's in teaching English, and I worked at a top private school. So again, it's actually right across the street from St. Mark's. It's a junior boarding school. So a school that was founded in the 1870s. So again, this is like elite American education. Like the tuition there was something like $75,000 a year. So you're dealing with like, the children of CEOs and actors, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
famous people and so on. So it's like that was the background that I came from and that I was used to and so on. Eventually, like working there, I was like, these kids are probably going to be okay with or without me. It was a great life. I enjoyed the experience and so on. But I wanted to give back to my own community. I transitioned from that school to a school called Al Noor Academy, which is New England's first full-time K through 12 Islamic school. So what I really wanted to do was bring these best practices from these elite private schools into the Islamic school world and try to upgrade the quality of our own education, particularly when it came to the next step, like college placement. There are a lot of Muslim schools that are K through 8, that they go through 8th grade, and then they send the kids off to high school, at a public school or something like that. And that always seems strange to me that you're like protecting your kids so much when they're really young, but then once the real fitness starts and like, high school, when everything's suddenly available, that you're not doing it. But the reason that a lot of people don't do Islamic schools is honestly the quality is pretty, unpredictable. Like they're very underfunded, and they don't always have the greatest infrastructure and so on. They're a little bit chaotic. They're wonderful places, but but people are concerned, especially about college outcomes. And so there at Al Noor, over the course of more than a decade, I really developed. I did a lot of stuff there as the assistant head of school, as head of the humanities department. I taught English, but I was also in charge of college placement, and that was the area where it was the biggest needle mover, I would say, because I would help these kids develop their college profile over the course of the roughly 5 years that I taught them. And so by the end, when they were applying to college, I knew them really, really well, was able to give them good advice. And we had a lot of success. The first kid I ever placed, he got into Harvard. And then we sent a bunch to MIT and Dartmouth and Brown and all the other great schools of the country. So it was like, subhanAllah, I'd sort of stumbled upon a service that was very valuable. But obviously, when you're working just in a single school setting, you're supporting 10, 20 students, whatever. It's a really small school. I was like, during the pandemic, we started teaching online, and I sort of realized there were parts of teaching that I'd sort of like had enough with after 20 years, and didn't want to like supervise lunch and study hall and things like that. And then I was like, what's next for me? What's the next challenge? And ultimately, this idea came that why don't I take all of this college expertise of helping kids navigate the college admissions process and bring it to the ummah as a whole, right? Because at least here in America, college admissions is quite complicated. I know you're based in Canada. The Canadian system, many other systems are relatively straightforward. It's really just a sort of meritocracy. They look at your grades, and that determines which
Mm.
schools are possible. Here, it's like this big, sort of complicated, holistic admissions thing. It's really, really quite complex. There's all the financial aid and everything. And so, yeah, so I wanted to bring those skills to the ummah as a whole. And I think on a deeper level, like my life transformed, as we were just saying, when I was 15 years old. So as I look at it, most of my life has been devoted to giving people around that age a similarly transformative experience. I think that's why I work with the age group that I do, the high school students, because it's sort of a way to give back to a time when my life completely changed. So yeah.
Honestly, like what you like how you like switch your education. You started like working with these kids and like almost making their dreams come true. Because to your point about how tough I know Canada is easy because Canada, like, you apply to universities based off your marks, you get accepted. Either you do
Hmm.
or you don't. Like, and even the toughest universities here, for example, like University of Toronto or University of Waterloo, which is, or even McGill in Montreal. But I still have heard how harder it is to, like, the whole application process, clearly, and like overwhelming. And having someone like yourself who's able to, like, who's went through a system, who's understood, who's able to give back, is obviously, it helps. Because, like, the hardest thing is, like, sometimes people get scared about it, like, oh, I don't know what to do. Especially, like, I heard people have to do essays. Like, if someone asked me to do an essay, I'm like, I wouldn't even know where to start. Especially, like, when you're
Hmm.
in high school, if you're someone who maybe slacked off a lot, like, knowing myself, like, I would say from from grade 9 to grade 11, I just slacked off a lot. It's not really until grade 12 sort of like, and I was getting decent marks, but like, I just didn't care. So I feel like, imagine someone who's so underwhelmed, doesn't know what to write, and then obviously they have you to able to shape their mind. It's so inspiring, in my opinion.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And definitely, the essays and figuring out, I think more than like the essays and stuff is sort of like the end of the process. But I think, one of the secret sauces that we had when I was working at Al Noor was that I did work with the kids over the course of quite a long period. I used to teach sixth grade English. I used to teach eighth and ninth grade English. I used to be their guidance counselor in 11th and 12th grade. So I was really working with them for 5 years. And one of the most common questions I get asked by parents about this college process is like, when should I start thinking about this? When should we start? Like, do we have to have the Harvard onesie and, like, baby Einstein, or stuff like that? Like, or, typically what I see within the Muslim community, they're not, most of I would say the average, like, avatar of the family that we work with now, the parents went to school back in their country, whether it was Egypt or Turkey or Pakistan or wherever it may have been. They were among the top students there. They maybe got an engineering degree or medical background, and so on. They came over here for grad school, and now they have established themselves here in the States. They very successful professionals. They obviously they have kids. The kids are coming up, and oftentimes it's like the first child is about to navigate this process, and they're like, I don't know what to do. Like I didn't do this myself. I don't know what to do. Obviously, we have a lot of people who were born in the States, and they recognize how complex it is, and so on. And so the people would always ask me, when should we start? And the answer I sort of built into the name of the company. So five before college. So it's about starting 5 years before college. So way back when you're in eighth grade, when you're right around the age when I became Muslim, eighth, ninth grade, that's the time when you really want to start thinking about these things. Because in order to have successful essays and a successful application, you need to tell a really compelling story that's sort of cohesive, that makes sense, and so on. And you need to start making decisions in those early years that are going to have a big impact on the types of opportunities you have, when you're actually applying to college. And so that's sort of how our system works. We start working with kids ideally on the first half of high school, eighth, ninth, 10th grade. They do a program that we offer called Find Your Qibla, which is all about discovering your purpose and your passion, like what you want, what mark you want to leave in the world, what is your North Star that's going to guide you. And then we translate that passion into a passion project. So something like you're doing, like starting a podcast, for example, is what some of our students have done, starting a small business, starting a charity, building apps, various different content creation things. It's really, there's so many different things you can do, but you want to do something that that's unique to you, that really you're solving some sort of problem that only you can solve, or because of your unique background, sort of like my educational background and everything that led me to do what I'm doing. We want to give the kids that same opportunity to find what that is. Because then if they do that and they start building a project when they're in ninth grade, and they build it and scale it over 10th and 11th grade, like they're going to have this asset, if you will, when they're applying to college, that is just makes them look head and shoulders better than the other students who just have gone a more typical track of just doing AP classes and things like that. So yeah, that's sort of the idea and origin story of Five Before College, and how we work.
I never really thought of it in terms of like, thinking about it 5 years before you enter, because I remember like you enter college, university when you're 18. So when I was 13 years old, because I know you mentioned passion projects, and I'll get to that. But I remember when I was 13 years old, if like looking at myself, like I never, if it was up to me hypothetically at the time, I was like, I don't want to go to school. I don't want to, because I always do what I wanted to do personally. I always, but the thing is too is also I feel people like misuse the term of education. Like I believe you should educate yourself in whatever it is. Like whether you want to go to like become a plumber, electrician, you want to start a business, go work under an entrepreneur and go learn how businesses run, understand every aspect out of it. But I was looking through one of your posts. I would really would love to have this conversation with you, which it's captivated me. And I think it's also important to talk about, because you mentioned Islamic school, and I feel like Islamic school has a stigma. It's like, oh, like you don't get that much real life skills. There's certain things that you're not exposed to. So what do you believe? I know you put a post about this, but I would love for the people who haven't saw it. Which is more important in raising Muslim youth? Like, is it like helping better a Muslim community? Is it, give them the life skills that they need to be in the world? And I know it's a complex, even the post says it's a complex question, but what do you believe? How can we gauge it in terms of how can we prepare our Muslim youth to go into college, university, also within life, and then the passion projects?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a good question. Obviously, it's a big question. I don't think there's a black and white answer. I think Islamic school can be a great option for a certain type of kid, and it cannot work very well for another. And obviously, all schools are not a monolith. There's so many differences. I think there are options. There's also homeschooling, of course, right? We actually homeschooled our own children up till eighth grade. If I think if you have the ability and desire to do it, that can lead to some really, really great outcomes. We've worked with a lot of homeschoolers in our program, and I think it's one really great way to instill values and so on. But obviously, the majority of Muslim students do go to public schools, and that's okay too, right? The public school is obviously you're going to be exposed to uh, things there, whether they're curricularly, or just in terms of what you see other kids doing that are going to be contrary to Islamic values. But at the same time, public schools have a lot of resources and and things like that. I think that's why programs like ours exist, to try to bridge that gap so that they continue to get the sort of Islamic angle on things. But I think when kids are young, whatever system they're in, the challenge is that they all have to become Muslim by choice, right? A lot of times when people see me or someone who's become Muslim, they say, "Mashallah, brother, you are better than us. We are Muslim by chance, and you are Muslim by choice." And that never sat well with me, right? Because first of all, we're all Muslim by choice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yahdi man yasha wa yudillu man yasha, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides whomsoever He wills. He leads astray whomsoever He wills. So it doesn't matter really how you got here, whether your parents were Muslim and you were born Muslim, or you chose it. Like, it was Allah's choice. Only Allah gives us tawfiq to practice this deen and so on. How many Muslims, how many Muhammads out there, go by Mo and haven't been inside a masjid for many years? The only salat that's ever prayed is their janazah. Like, how many people like that are there, right? Like, so it's not like that just being born Muslim makes you a great Muslim, right? So the other thing is, like, we need to be Muslim by choice in the sense that we've made that decision. I think for when you're in younger elementary, middle school, you sort of follow whatever your parents do. If your parents are practicing the deen, then you sort of follow in their footsteps and you don't even think twice. When you get to around this age of, it's just about 15, the exact time when I became Muslim, that's when you start to, like, develop an independent perspective and personality. And that's where you see kids go in different directions. And you see kids from very practicing families go get off the qibla, so to speak. And then you see other kids really, really embrace this, or and they go in all sorts of different directions. And so that's like the critical time. So I think the most important thing, regardless of whether you're homeschooled, Islamic school, public school, private school, whatever is out there, that you become Muslim by choice, that interact with the deen, and you spend your time in the masjid and go on, have these experiences, listen to the scholars and so on. And at some point your heart changes and you say, I'm not practicing Islam because my parents are, I'm practicing Islam because I know this is the truth, right? And that really has to happen, ideally, during those high school years, before they go off to college, right? Because if you go to college and you're shaky in your deen, and you don't really have this Islamic identity, like thabit, like fixed inside of you, then college can be a pretty tricky place, right? Shaitan has some pretty powerful things. The fitna of the opposite gender is very, very difficult one when you're in college. Obviously, there's a lot of alcohol and other things that people are exposed to. So there's all sorts of, like, minefields that you have to navigate there. And if you're not really strong in your Islamic identity at that point, then it can be a real challenge. And so again, all of this is why, some people are like, what does Islam have to do with college prep? And I'm like, it has everything to do with it, because, like, we don't want to just prepare our kids to get into, Harvard or something like that. We want them to go there, maintain their Islamic identity, and then go off in the world and be productive Muslims who are actually changing and walking the halls of power and doing all that they need to do in order to try to fix the world, inshallah.
Inshallah. There's a couple things I want to touch on that you just said. One is about helping Muslim teams keep their identity, which is so important because, to your point, at 15 years of age, when you enter the ninth grade, depending on who your community is, who your friends are, you can start switching up. And I remember when I entered, like, ninth grade, that was 2009, and I remember, like, that point, technology wasn't as prevalent as it is now. Facebook wasn't even as big at that point. Like, no one even had it. And the biggest thing is too, is there's always this, like, stigma. Oh, being Muslim is like, oh, it's uncool. Like, you can't do this. It keeps you from. You mentioned the fitna of, like, women, and that is the biggest trial for a guy in high school, because that's when all your, like, emotions are all out of place. You just are able to maybe get away with stuff. In reality, you won't. And I believe having teaching Islamic values, and again, everyone has their own journey. But having a good community also, I think, is really important, because I feel like when you go to college, you go to university, even the fitness, the trials get even harder. Because I feel also, like, for example, like, when you talk about business, sometimes people be like, oh, I can work with an interest, but as a Muslim, you can't be doing that. So how can I make halal rizq without disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is so important to have those Islamic principles. You can learn, knowledge is knowledge. You want to learn about how the business works, but then also how you're going to apply it to yourself is a whole different thing. And also to your next point regarding like Muslim identity, like I guess follow up with Muslim identity. I feel like when I was growing up, a lot of the Muslims who are my year, like a lot of us, it's not that we were ashamed. Like, it's not that we were ashamed, but a lot of us, like sometimes we would like break the laws. You know what? Oh, let's go, let's skip, let's this. Oh, like because you wanted to like have that respect, but when you look back in hindsight, you're like you're missing out. And something you were mentioning to how you dislike when people say that you chose to be Muslim, and then versus us like we're born. I kind of agree with you because I feel like there are people who are born Muslim who still don't go to Jama'ah, they don't go to pray. They're choosing this. And Madam Day, whether you're born or you revert back to Islam, at the end of the day, it's up to you. You have free will. Just because you're born Muslim does not mean you have a gateway to heaven. Or just because you convert does not mean you're better. There's some people who are born Muslims, Allahumma barak, who are made against people who convert, who maybe may not follow. I think it goes different ways.
Yeah, no, 100%. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, no, I think what you said about friends having a huge influence on you. I think it was Jim Rohn who said that you are the average of the five people you spend the most time with. So
Mm,
that's who you become. So, and there's a hadith that that you're on the deen of your khalil, that you're on the deen of the person who is closest to you. And so choosing friends wisely like has a huge impact on how you develop and how you see yourself and how you show up in the world. So that's really huge. And then you also mentioned sort of technology. Yeah, I mean these kids. I mean, I guess you discovered maybe me through Instagram or wherever it was.
yeah,
But so there are some beneficial things, of course.
very
But
beneficial.
it's a fitna, man. Like these little dopamine snacks that you get when you fire up your shorts and things like that, and you start scrolling through. You're fighting a major like there are a lot of very very smart people who are tasked to keep your attention on their platforms, and it's a pretty hard thing to navigate. And so at the same time, I'm not an absolutist. I'm not someone who tells kids, oh, delete all the social media and so on, because we have a lot. My own daughter has a YouTube channel, right? Like it's sort of the way the modern world works and things like that. And so you need to learn how to live in the world, not sort of and have the boat go over the water and just not sink, not let the world enter so much into your heart. And then I think you mentioned something about sort of shame, and I think that's the whole thing. I think young Muslims today, their Islam is something that they're not. I don't know that they use the word shame, but they are very reluctant to wear a thobe in public or make wudu in public or certainly pray at the airport or wherever it is. And I think that's where Nabil's story is so instructive, because not only was he of course protecting his own deen, but he also it's a form of dawah, right? The best form of dawah is like what the Sahaba used to say. The Sahaba used to say, "Be like us." Right? They didn't have to give some big long khutbah and speech and explain theology and so on. People would see them and they'd see their akhlaq and they'd see how they showed up in the world, and they'd be amazed, and they had this nur and a glow about them, and they just wanted to be like them, and they would say, "Be like us. Just do what we do." And that's really what we want, in terms of that choosing Islam, is to give kids that sincerity. Alhamdulillah, now it's the last few days of Ramadan. You see, like, people's iman has risen and they're feeling high. Like I was just at the masjid last night. You see all these youth. There was this kid that I used to teach when I was in sixth grade. Now he's the imam of a masjid, or he's leading tarawih there. He made an hour-long dua. He was crying. Like I was like, whoa, what's going on here? Like, it's just, mashallah, iman is the most valuable thing that we have, and the protection that we can have for all areas of our life.
Absolutely. Having iman is 100% extremely important. Like iman with like having faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, having faith in things that you want to do and things that you want to accomplish, and like believing Allah will give it to you, like not saying a half-hearted dua, like believing that you make that dua, then just have tawakkul, which I believe is really important. And you mentioned a lot of your people that you've inspired, that you've helped, that you mentored. And I really want to talk about those stories because you definitely have changed a lot of lives in a way. Like they probably still go up to you and tell you, "Oh, this is what you did for me." You probably taught a lot of students, or sometimes maybe you forgot the names, but you remember the face. How does it make you feel when someone comes up to you and says, "I'm the student that used to like make trouble or like or this, but now I'm here"? Like,
Mm.
how does it make you feel that, alhamdulillah, that the students that you taught are now in better places? If you can
Yeah.
even give us a couple stories.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things, like for all the challenges of like the Islamic schools in general, maybe the one specifically where I worked, the budget, this occasional like you know administrative chaos and whatnot. I think that the students, at least at that school, and I don't know this is true at every Islamic school, had graduated with a very strong understanding of the deen, and they would go off to college, and they wouldn't just be a part of their MSA; they'd be the president of the MSA. Like, the president of the MIT MSA for several years was an Al Noor student. I was just at UMass Amherst, which is our sort of flagship public university. President is a student of mine, and so on. And so, I think when kids have that early experience, in terms of like the work with with Find Your Qibla, and since I've been doing it on my own, a lot of our students are still in high school. There was a girl named Lena. She's from California, so she joined us like, right at the beginning, like after eighth grade or somewhere between like eighth or ninth grade or something like that. And she identified as her Qibla, as we did all this brainstorming, that she loved working with the elderly. Like, she lives with like or she had, her closest relationships are with her two grandmothers. She's volunteering at an elderly home. So anyway, she decided to do this, like, she called it the Elder Wisdom Podcast. That was her passion project that she presented at the end of Find Your Qibla, where she would go to the nursing home and interview these seniors and sort of tell their story, sort of like a Humans of New York for the elderly. And then, alhamdulillah, she was really excited about it. But then when she got back to school, she decided, hey, what if this became a pen pal program? And so she matched all the kids at her school with a specific elder, and they would send like old fashioned letters back and forth. That program became really popular. Other schools heard about it, so she sort of created like a franchise model that where her this pen pal thing could be spread. Then somehow MIT got hold of it, or she applied to an MIT grant. She gets this MIT grant. And then, now she's starting to get invited to, like next month she's speaking at this National Council on Aging thing, and she's become like one of the youth like experts on, old age and this intergenerational communication. So it's amazing what happens when the seed is planted at that young age, and then it sprouts over time. And there, mashallah, there's so many stories. There was a student came to us who was, mashallah, he was very successful on YouTube, right? He had over 100,000 followers on YouTube. The first time I remember during the interview, he showed me like, that plaque that they send you when you hit that mark and so on. But spending all that time online, he started to get exposed to all sorts of things that are harmful, like whether it's things that you see, things that you hear, etc. And so his passion project, he decided to do something called Censor, CENSR, and it's sort of like a haram blur, if you will. Like, it blurs out haram images and words and things like that, so you can be a little bit safer on the internet. So people of faith can use the internet in a more comfortable way. So again, you find a problem that you're facing that's connected deeply to your story and so on. And the thing, to tie it back into like college, like you were mentioning college essays earlier, when people are writing college essays, that's a really fascinating story to say. You talk about YouTube, you talk about the things you were seeing, talk about what you did about it, and now how it's grown and scaled, and how you had to learn vibe coding and you had to learn this and that to get the product to market and so on. So yeah, it's a very different experience than what most high school kids do, which is sort of like go with the flow, and just sort of they don't really have any sense of where they're going or what they really want to do. They're just sort of doing whatever they're told, and not really, they're sort of the passenger along for the ride, or the NPC, like, who's not really in the game. And like, what we try to get all young people to recognize is like, you're the boss, you're the author of your own story. You don't need to take no for an answer. You can do whatever you want to do, but you got to make that decision to do it.
Like how you called it find your qibla, because it's just like almost like finding your passion, knowing what you want to do, and what's your purpose is. Like, what is it that you, because I feel like sometimes parents have this, or people have this influence. Oh, like, you're good at math, become an engineer, or you're good in sciences, go become a doctor. But sometimes people might be smart academically, but then they want to get into something that's their passion project. And having someone
Mhm.
like you who's able to help them find their qibla, help them find what they should be doing helps. Like that sister who from one podcast ended up doing a program, and then the brother with the YouTube channel. And it shows you that being able to think at a young age what to do helps so much. And that's something I've always encouraged young people. I'm like, hey, like, find a passion project that you want to work on. I'm like, you want to work 9 to 5, great, but also find something that you're good on. And I remember once one of my family friends, I was telling this to him. He's like, and I told him what do you want to do? He's like, I want to open a restaurant. I'm like, you know how to cook? He's like, yeah. I'm like, have you started like going on YouTube, doing cooking videos, like showing like your recipes? He's like, no. He's like, I think that's weird. I'm like, well, that's how we're gonna start. That's how you're gonna start. Because I'm like, okay, you want to do computer science, it's amazing, but you also got to go out of your way and portray that. I think the finding your qibla is so important because you're gonna try maybe multiple things. Sometimes people get it right on the first shot, but I think, one day when I'm married and have a family, I think I'm gonna give you the credit in terms of what I do because I feel like it's so important to like shape your kids at a young age, being able to let them know that there's different opportunity that they can do and they can go after. Because when you're the average 13-year-old is probably at home playing like a video game, not even like thinking that 18 years old is far away, but in reality, it's only 5 years. And you don't think about it that way. It's almost like telling a kid it's 5 summers. It's 5 summers from now. And when you say
Mhm.
5 summers from now, they're like, oh, that sounds too less. Now
Mhm.
I should start thinking about it. And well, like you mentioned, like we're talking about college, we're talking about passion projects, but when you're having conversation with their families, right, and then you tell them that, hey, you should be more worried about it, like thinking about it, because I feel like the average family probably thinks about it once they're getting to like time to apply. So how do you inform the families? Like sometimes the kids may not understand sometimes, but how do you tell the families like, hey, your kid has something here, like think about his future from now?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think definitely, it takes a village to raise a child, and working with the parents and so on is a big part of what we do. I think the message of five before college, especially because it's built into the name, has gotten out there. Like, I can't tell you, every time I go to the masjid now, it's sort of weird, like being on social media, because people are like, oh, there's the social media star, and like I don't have a big following or anything, but still, you do have to put yourself out there a fair amount as running a business and things like that.
For sure.
But yes, subhanallah, I think some of what you were saying before really spoke to me. You mentioned sort of doctors, lawyers, engineers. Like, I think a lot of parents, their kids an eighth grader, they're thinking, let's turn him into what I am, or let's turn, like, those are the big three careers for Muslim families, right? Doctor, lawyer, engineer. There's nothing wrong with those careers. I have a lot of former students who are doctors, who are lawyers, who are engineers. But the reality is there's such a big gamut out there. And I think one thing that people sort of have backwards is they think that success leads to happiness, right? That success is the key to happiness, that you need to go to school, get good grades, get into a good college, maybe go to grad school, get a great career, and marry the perfect person, get your house with a white picket fence, 2.5 kids, and then inshallah you're going to be happy once you achieve all that. And what social science has shown is it's actually the opposite. It's not that success leads to happiness, it's that happiness leads to success. When you do something that you're uniquely suited for, that you love, that you would do whether the people are paying you or not, that you wake up early in the morning to do, like what I'm doing now. Yeah, Hamza, it's a business. We have a team of 8. Like, it's a, but this is stuff I would do for free. Like, I love talking to kids about their passions and their futures. I love talking to parents and strategizing about how to get their kids the best possible outcome. So when you do things that you love, right, then and you're happy about it, that's what leads to success. People want to be around people who feel alive, and so on. And so I think a lot of parents, like, they have this, like, they talk about the different mindsets. There's the carpenter mindset and the gardener mindset. And so the carpenter mindset likes to work off of a blueprint, and they want like an exact sort of step by step thing for families. I mean, to raise your children, exact, like, things. And there's some benefit, and there are parts of the college process that can be turned into a blueprint. But the reality is, a lot of times you end up trying to force a round peg into a square hole. Like, you're trying to make your kid into an engineer when they're actually a poet, right? Not that they have to be a poet as their career, but, like, in other words, that's not where their skill set lies. That's not, they'll go along with it, but they'll grudgingly go along with it. They'll never become world class in it because they don't really, really care. The high school experience and all the extracurriculars and everything you do outside is just this opportunity to find that spark, to find that thing which really lights you up, to find your qibla, if you will, that's going to lead to that success and lead to that happiness, which in the long term leads to your success.
How like you were mentioning about the whole Muslim journey, like doctor, lawyer, engineer, because I've seen it. I remember one time I was talking to one of our old, like, I guess like a family friend gathering. I remember I said, now at that point I was only 18 years old, but I remember I said, I'm like, you shouldn't dictate what your son does, because to your point, there's a lot of, like, because when you, for example, it's like asking, if you ask a fish how to walk, it's gonna think it's dumb. If you ask a certain animal to swim, if you ask a bird to start swimming, it's gonna think it's like not intelligent. And I think my point is here is, like, to your point, if we understand what our kids want and what their skills are, it helps so much. Like, for example, like I always knew as a kid I wanted to become a business owner, because I always knew I was creative, I was a risk taker, like I didn't care about losing money. I understood I would do different, and certain people would entertain me. And I remember at the time I like, the whole Arab thing. Oh, I'll become an engineer. So I remember when I took physics, my mark wasn't high enough. I remember the teacher told me, it's like, listen, I'm not trying to demotivate you, but he's like, if you're struggling in grade 11 physics, you're gonna have a harder time in grade 12, or even a harder time in university. And I remember he said, not it's encouraging you, but just going based off from what I see. And at that point, it was kind of like a relief, because I'm like, I didn't want to become an engineer. And it took me back to what my teacher said back in grade 8. She's like, never do what someone else wants to do what you want to do. Because she was telling us a story where her parents first had become an accountant, but all she ever wanted to do was teaching. So she quit her job, even though she was making a lot of money. But it shows you that money is not everything. Like, you could, if you're like, to use your term, finding a qibla is for you to be a top YouTuber for Muslims, and to generate and help Muslims, like, grow and do whatever it is you want to do. But you end up becoming a doctor, but you don't want to become a doctor. Then what happens is now you got to go through all this education. I feel like parents should also be, as long as it's halal, they should also be really responsive to what their kid wants. Now we live in a time where there's so many different things that you can do anyways, and that's how I feel about it. Because I feel like we live in a society where you don't only have to become an engineer, doctor, and lawyer. I'm not talking about it, but if you want to become that, by all means. But I feel like if you know your kid is able to become something else, then do so.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, I think people also recognize, or I hope they do, that AI is really upending sort of so much of what knowledge workers' lives are like. And and that's another thing we try to build into our programs a lot, is sort of responsible, ethical use of AI, because I feel like schools are doing kids a real disservice by not teaching them how to use some of these tools. Like, I'm just every single day I'm blown away by what Claude and other things can do. It's just it's
Yeah.
spectacular. I think yeah, what you said, never your teacher, eighth grade teacher, never do something what someone else wants you to do. Such great advice. I understand where Muslim families are coming from, right? Like the reason medicine, law, and engineering are so popular is because they're pretty safe careers, right? Like, if you actually finally get a medical degree, right, then you're probably going to be employed quite, wherever you want. Not wherever you want, but like you'll have, a pretty safe, well-respected type of career. Engineering, I think, can be great, and there's so many different forms of engineering. So if you're strong in math and physics and that stuff revs your engine, I think, there's a lot of possibilities inside of engineering. But I think the reality is, I think a lot of people see college as a place to build professional skills. And that may be true in other countries, but here the foundational, like the undergraduate education is not really designed to prepare you for the workplace. It's not designed to teach you what to think. It's designed to teach you how to think, right? And that's really the difference. Like, if you look at any of the Ivies, like these schools that people put on pedestals and so on, they're all liberal arts schools, right? They're all schools that have a very broad curriculum where they want you to do some humanities, they want you to do some STEM, they want you to push yourself to explore things outside of your comfort zone, right? And this interdisciplinary thinking, this taking something that you learn in math and applying it to anthropology or whatever it could be, right, is that's exactly what higher level thinkers do. And I think a lot of Muslim families have this sense that college is just to prep them for their career. The reality is, most career training and job training happens out in the real world, right? Like any big company is going to have an intensive training practice where you actually learn how to do the work. So, but what you really want is, you want to have creative kids who are thinkers, who are problem solvers, and so on. And so I think I try to help reframe, the purpose of education and so on. And then, of course, there's graduate school, there's going to medical school or law school or business school, or, getting a master's or a PhD or something like that. Like, that again, like those are usually a little bit more career focused and so on.
I have a question for you. I guess my last question, because I know, like I said, I'll end it by 4:15. But my question for you is, you do a lot of great things. You've shaped a lot of different minds. You've clearly, in this conversation, even in our previous conversation off camera, I've been captivated by you this whole time. Allah Mabarak, may Allah reward you. But when you are mentoring and helping these youth, how do you ensure to keep Islamic principles on their journey? Like, what do you do in terms of when you're giving them advice, so that they don't lose their value, they don't lose their identity, but they're still achieving what it is that they want to go after?
Mm. Yeah, so the second part of the company name, Five Before College, obviously starting 5 years before college, but it's also based off of the five before five hadith. So the Prophet ﷺ said, take benefit or take advantage of five before five. So your youth before your old age, your health before your sickness, your wealth before your poverty, your free time before your busyness, and your life before your death. And so that hadith is actually the foundation of everything that we do inside of Five Before College, inside of Find Your Qibla, and so on. Right? And so really what we're trying to do is trying to get the kids to excel across those areas. So what does that mean? So youth before old age. What's the full-time job of a student? Of a teenager? It's to be a student, right? So academics is critically important. So we need to learn study skills. We teach a class called Baraka Boosted Study Skills. How do you attract baraka to your education? Things like studying in a state of wudu, making 2 rakats before an exam, and so on. But then also science-backed things around active recall and other things that to actually become, understand how the learning process works. Intellectual curiosity. What are you reading about, learning about? That all goes into youth. Health before sickness, right? So this deals with mental health, physical health, playing sports, all that kind of stuff, taking care of your mind and your body. Wealth before poverty. They need to start exploring careers. They need to start doing internships and other sorts of programs. They need to understand the way the world works. They should try to make some money. Like you mentioned, entrepreneurship. They should try to figure that out. I mean, one of my biggest regrets is it took me like 45 years to like have the guts to like go out there and do something on my own. And it's alhamdulillah, it's been wonderful. Like I can't imagine ever working for a boss again. It's not gonna happen, inshallah. Like I love what I do. And I think for kids, if they have that inside of them, they want to learn that, early on. And then free time before busyness, right? That they think about their friendships, who they're spending time with, or, their extracurriculars, what activities they're doing, their passion project, that sort of thing. And then life before death, right? That's all about preparing for the inevitable, that we're going to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's our iman, our akhlaq, and our character, and so we try to really work with kids in this. We try to provide an Islamic framework for this, so that college prep doesn't become this transactional thing about, just doing the essays and things like that. Of course, we support kids with the actual nuts and bolts of the process, but it's really about how do we do this in a way that you stay true to yourself. One of the things I always tell families is college is not a trophy, it's a trampoline. Right? It's not something where we want to put the bumper sticker on our car and things like that. It's the trampoline that's going to lead to success. And so rather than always asking, like what happens, at least in the US, because of the way college admissions works, is kids always ask me, does this look good for college? Should I do debate or should I do Model UN? Which one looks better for college? And it's just fundamentally the wrong question, right? The question is, what looks better for you? Which one is more part of your qibla and what you want to do? Which one is connected to the person you're trying to become when you're a fully fledged adult, and so on? What do you even want your life to look like when you're 30 years old? What does an ideal Tuesday look like in your life when you're 30 years old and everything's gone right? Where are you living? What car are you driving? Are you married? Do you have kids? Like what are you doing for work? How are you making money? Like most kids have never taken a second to set goals for themselves, to set a vision for what they're trying to become. Now the reality is, like, the jobs that 15 years from now, they're probably going to look quite different. I could never have told you I'm going to run a online college coaching business to help Muslim teens, because like Zoom hadn't been invented and things like that didn't exist, right? So the specifics are a little bit hard, but if you say I want to, lead a life inspiring others, teaching, leading, like there are broad strokes things that you can do, but you need to set goals. You need to figure out who you're trying to become and then come up with a plan. It's like there's a great book called The Magic of Thinking Big, and then there's another book called Think and Grow Rich. And both of them sort of have the same idea that you need to have a big vision for who you're trying to become, right? Like a 10x vision of what's possible. There's another book, 10x is easier than 2x. So all of these things, like what we want to inspire in our kids is not to settle, not to just go along with the crowd. We're Muslims, we're the khulafa al-ard. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put us here and we have a pretty big mission. We're not the messengers of Allah, but we're the messengers of the messenger of Allah. Right? We are the messengers of the messenger of Allah, and we have a huge responsibility on our shoulders to go off and succeed in every different aspect of life that we go into, and to be at the highest levels with ihsan and everything we do.
I mean, you know what I love you said is how like for example, if you go back 15 years ago, thinking about now, like you never imagined this technology to even exist. Like even if what you're thinking about it, you're like, how am I gonna do it? For example, Zoom never existed. This platform that we're using now never existed. Like podcasts before were probably just you editing on an old version of GarageBand. It probably sounds chopped up and it wasn't the best quality. And I think also 15 years from now, I even was talking to like my mom. I'm like, do you think that these kids are gonna be working these are regular jobs? Probably not. They probably a lot more to do with AI and something else that doesn't exist today that might exist 15 years from now, because we're always updating. And I think being future focused is so important. And honestly, like I'm so happy that like someone in the Muslim Ummah is doing this, that like allowing these kids to think outside the box, not only inside the box. Like we are growing as an Ummah. I believe it's so important for everybody as a Muslim to be successful in the journey that they're going after. Because I feel like, subhanAllah, the way I look at it is when from the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he says, when you're asking for Jannah, ask for Jannah al Firdaus. I kind of look at it, when you're asking for Allah for something, ask to be the best in it. Like don't ask to be average. Like if you want to be the best, if you want to be a doctor, ask to be the best doctor, the
Mm-hmm.
best engineer. I don't believe you should be asking for just like Allah is the one who gives all bounties, and I believe that's really important to understand. And before we let you go, I want to play a small game with you to get to know you a little bit. Some just like rapid fire questions, and yeah, nothing too tough. My first question for you is, what's your favorite subject to teach?
I mean, I was an English teacher at heart, so I love teaching literature and things like that. I would say.
What would you say is your favorite book?
You can see there are a few books behind me.
Yes.
We actually have a 5 before 5 book list that has in each of those categories we were just talking about, like
Yeah.
6 or 9 books and so on. So it's really really hard for me to narrow it down. I mean, the typical answer is the Quran, but I don't know. There's so many books. One book that really changed my life was The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. I read that when I was in that point, like during the pandemic when I was trying to figure out what was next, and it really reframed like what's possible. The name is sort of gimmicky and it's not great. Like one of the reasons I didn't read it was because I was like, a 4 hour work week. What does that even mean? But actually, the book is extremely powerful, and his podcast is fantastic. Tim Ferriss podcast.
Mhm.
That's been a huge influence on sort of my thinking, how I've arranged my life, what I'm trying to do. So yeah, that's one.
Amazing. I've actually heard of that book before. Never really read it, but
Yeah,
I'm
highly
excited to hear
recommend.
about it. Definitely, and I'll definitely let you know my thoughts. What is your favorite thing to do when you're, like not working, like your pastime? What do you do to relax?
Yeah, I play a lot of tennis. I've been playing tennis since I was a kid and play it competitively here in Boston. Pickleball started a little bit as well, although I've sort of gone back to tennis a fair amount.
Mhm.
Obviously my kids are older now, so we do some stuff together. Like I'm a recurring character in my daughter's YouTube channel. Her YouTube channel is Sumi Tyler, which is my mom's name actually. And I'm Sumi Dad, so I'm sort of a recurring character. So we spend a lot of time doing that. And then with my son, we actually have a halal beef jerky business. So like it's hard to
Okay.
find good halal beef jerky. Calling it a business is a little bit wrong because we tend to get high on our own supply and just sort of eat it ourselves. But we have the vision of creating a beef jerky brand because it's something that's hard to get here. Yeah, skiing. I'm actually going off to Canada
Nice.
BC to go skiing with Nabil, among others, right after Eid. So yeah, those are some things. Sorry, this isn't rapid. I'm not good at rapid fire.
No, you're good. You're good. I love it. I love the answers. I love the answers.
Yeah, yeah.
My next question for you is, sorry, is which prophet story do you believe that most resonates with you, that has
Ooh,
helped you?
yeah, that's an interesting one. I mean, I really, the story of Musa alayhi salam, I think, I mean, various aspects of it have always resonated with me, like, especially like how he was sort of, he grew up in the house of Fir'aun, like, as a believer inside of like a system of batil and managed to really change it from within. I mean, obviously I'm nothing like Musa alayhi salam, and hopefully America's not quite pharaonic, but it's getting there a little bit. But that story is always, resonated in the sense that we as Muslims we have the ethics and the what this country really needs, and I think on a deeper level, a lot of the work that I do is around dawah. So do dawah through through the kids that we work with, so that they can change the character of this country from within. These are kids who are born here; they're full-blooded, patriotic American kids and Canadians and other other things. But they, out of that love, they try to bring their values and so on. So that's one.
I love that. My next question for you is, this one's probably not gonna be a rapid fire because I guess it's also deep. But it was,
Hmm.
if you were to write a book, what chapter would you be on, and what would the chapter be called?
Ooh, wow. You gotta like preview these with the guests, man. I mean, I am thinking of writing a book because like, I mean, writing's always been sort of my superpower. That was, when people ask me why you go to Harvard, how you get into Harvard, it was probably because of, being a strong writer. And even now, I had a Substack for a long time. I still have it, but called 5 Before 5, and that was sort of what helped launch me towards this. And now within 5 Before College, one of the things we do is we send out at least 2 emails a week, just informing people and teaching people, and so writing is something that I love. In terms of like the book, like the natural, I really want to write a book about this college and high school experience and so on, but I don't want it to be boring. So there's this genre called the business fable, and there's like Patrick Lencioni's written some of these, like Five Dysfunctions of a Team and other books like that, where instead of like just having a nonfiction book that just breaks things down, it's really you're telling a story, and the story is teaching you lessons along the way. And so that's sort of, I haven't really started working on this yet. I have a lot going on with the business and so on, but that's something that I
Yeah,
that I want to do. Yeah, so writing, I don't know which specific chapter, but maybe the chapter about becoming Muslim by choice. Yeah.
I love that. I want to thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, Hamza. It was such an esteemed honor to have you. Had such an amazing time, and I cannot wait to have you next time, inshallah. Before we leave, I'd love for you to, like, shout out like where people can follow you, even your daughter's account, even the business that you just want to do. If you want to shout all that out, so people can find you. And
Yeah, so 5beforecollege.com is our main website. And there you can find information. You can book a call with us right on that page. I think it's at Hamza Henshaw. Hamza has an H on the end. At Hamza Henshaw on Instagram, Facebook. I don't actually. I have a team who runs some of the social media, so I don't even know the handles all that well. But I just send them stuff, and then it shows up, and then people tell me they see it.
yeah,
And where else? My daughter's YouTube channel I mentioned was Sumi Tyler. We're also on YouTube, like we do a lot of webinars. And so, the best thing is to get onto our email list, because that's where we sort of keep people up to date. We have WhatsApp groups and things like that, but it all sort of happens when you sort of opt into our email list and so on, so, which you can do on the website as well. So, yeah, hope that's helpful.